So, arguments that many supporters of the decriminalization model have against both the Nordic and the abolitionist model is that these models, they view prostitution or they view prostitutes as victims, right? So that idea denies the right to autonomy over one's body, and it doesn't account for those who are legally and mentally competent to make their own calculated decisions to sell their body. These models often implement supportive services to help prostitutes leave their occupation with the intent to ultimately do away with prostitution. And my response to that is that while the models, the Nordic and the abolitionist models, offer these supportive services and encourage the movement away from prostitution, it is not a requirement of this legal route. I personally believe these services should be in place because from my exposure to prostitutes and my kind of my extensive research, I've had a lot of exposure to prostitutes. I've learned that most of them don't dream of being a prostitute. So these services are necessary. But I do agree with those that support the decriminalization model in that this issue shouldn't be taken from a stance to end prostitution, as competent adults can make their own decisions, right? It is also good to note that neither the Nordic nor the abolitionist model places regulations on prostitution. I know we've discussed this in previous videos, but it's a valid argument in that what other business in society, doesn't support society with through taxation, through paving our sidewalks and funding our libraries and things. So it is an argument I think worth bringing up. But to summarize, decriminalization, while it approaches prostitution in a progressive way, seeing the act of buying and selling sex as a decision mentally competent adults should be able to make, and it acknowledges the need for prostitutes to be protected by law, it fails to look holistically at sex work. It sees sex work through the frames of prostitution, but it doesn't acknowledge its effects on the demand for sex works, on the pornography business, which has a huge play in human trafficking, and it certainly fails to acknowledge its effects on the sex trafficking industry. The abolitionist model, as opposed to the neo-abolitionist model, also sees prostitution through a progressive lens, as it acknowledges the free will of buying and selling of sex. But in making third-party involvement illegal, it attempts to stifle the demand of prostitution and its effects on the sex trafficking industry. It is not a flawless model. I don't think we've come up with one yet, but I do argue that it is one step closer to protecting the rights of all involved in the sex work, especially those who are forced or coerced into it. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something, and if you're interested in learning more about sex work, prostitution, sex trafficking, human trafficking, take a look at my blog, theabolitionist.org, where you'll find weekly articles and updates on the industry both locally and globally. I actually created a post about this topic here, so if you want to read it, if you're more of a visual learner, that'll be there for you. And I'll provide a link to the blog as well. Thank you.